Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you a shocking and revealing story that will completely change your view of God and religions. Dorian Beckett had a near-death experience and came back with a surprising truth. God is not who the religions say. What he discovered on the other side will shake your deepest beliefs. So go ahead and leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any revealing content like this. Get ready for a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew. My name is Dorian Beckett. Until the winter of 1980, I was just another young college student like so many others, full of dreams and questions about life. At that time, I was in my final year of university, immersed in philosophy studies that, while fascinating, seemed to raise more questions than provide answers. I found myself constantly reflecting on the purpose of our existence, the meaning of life and death, and the role we play in this vast universe. This relentless quest for answers left me restless. I felt that there was something more, something beyond what academic books and lectures could teach me. It was as if I was groping in the dark, searching for a light that could illuminate the path to the truth I so desperately longed to discover. It was in this context that my best friend, Jared, suggested a trip to the mountains of British Columbia. The idea was to go climbing, an adventure that would take us out of our academic routine and put us in direct contact with nature. Jared, half jokingly, half seriously, suggested that perhaps nature could offer me the answers I was so desperately seeking. At that moment, the proposal made perfect sense. After all, what did I have to lose? At the very least, it would be a refreshing experience, an opportunity to clear my mind and gain a new perspective. At most, who knows, I might find some deep insight in the heights of the mountains. Little did I know that this trip would completely change the course of my life. What I experienced in the mountains of British Columbia was something that transcends common human understanding. It was a journey that took me beyond the limits of our physical world, an experience that challenged everything I thought I knew about reality, about God, and about the universe itself. What I'm about to share here is not an easy story to tell, nor to believe. I know that to many, it may sound like a delusion or a fantastic invention. Sometimes, I wish it had just been an elaborate dream. But it wasn't. It was real as anything I've ever experienced in my life. This is my story. The story of how a simple climb turned into a journey beyond life and death, and how that experience completely redefined my understanding of existence. It's the story of how I died, saw what exists beyond the veil of death, and came back to tell the tale. The trip began like any other adventure in nature. Jared and I were experienced in hiking and survival in hostile environments, so we felt prepared for the challenges that the mountains of British Columbia would throw at us. Armed with our best climbing gear, adequate supplies, and a detailed map of the area, we set out full of expectations. The first few days were exactly what we had expected, challenging but rewarding. With each meter we climbed, the air became thinner and the scenery more breathtaking. The panoramic views of the snow-covered mountains were literally awe-inspiring. At night, we camped under a vast, star-studded sky that seemed unreal in its brightness. As we progressed, I felt a subtle change taking place within me. The physical exertion and the wild beauty around us seemed to clear my mind of everyday worries. The philosophical questions that had been tormenting me at university seemed less urgent, replaced by a sense of peace and connection with the natural world. However, nature has a cruel way of reminding us of our insignificance. On the fourth day of our journey, the weather changed drastically. What started as a light snowfall quickly turned into a fierce storm. The wind howled around us, as sharp as blades of ice. The snow fell so densely that we could barely see a few meters ahead. Jared and I exchanged looks, the worry clear on our faces. We knew we needed to find shelter quickly. The temperature was dropping to dangerous levels, and our clothes, though suitable for the cold, were no match for this unexpected storm. We decided to descend, seeking a lower altitude where we could protect ourselves. Each step was a battle against the wind and snow. My hands, even inside gloves, began to go numb. The cold penetrated my bones, and I felt my energy draining quickly. It was then that I realized how fragile we are in the face of nature's forces. All my philosophical questions now seemed trivial. The only thing that mattered was survival, placing one foot in front of the other and keeping moving. Jared shouted instructions to me, his voice almost swallowed by the howling wind. We were descending a particularly steep and treacherous section of the mountain. Visibility was nearly zero, and every move had to be carefully calculated. That's when it happened. My rope got stuck in a crevice in the rock. I tried to free it, but my hands were so frozen I could barely feel my fingers. Panic began to set in. I knew standing still was dangerous, that I needed to keep moving, but I was trapped. I looked down, trying to assess my situation, and that's when the abyss seemed to call to me. It was a strange, almost hypnotic feeling. For a brief moment, I considered letting go of the rope, letting myself fall. The cold and exhaustion were clouding my judgment. Jared kept shouting, trying to guide me, keep me focused, but his voice seemed distant, unreal. And then, without really making a conscious decision, my fingers opened. The last thing I remember is the sensation of falling towards absolute darkness. The moment of the fall is something I will never forget. It's strange how time seems to expand in those critical moments. What must have lasted only a few seconds felt like it stretched on for an eternity. As I fell, a surreal calm washed over me. The fear I expected never came. Instead, I experienced a sense of almost euphoric liberation. The roar of the wind in my ears diminished, and the biting cold that had tormented me seconds earlier completely disappeared. I remember seeing the world spin around me, flashes of rock, snow, and dark sky blurring together. Strangely, I didn't feel panic. It was as if part of me knew something extraordinary was about to happen, something beyond mere physical falling. As I approached the ground, or at least what I imagined to be the ground, a profound peace enveloped me. All thoughts about my life, my fears, my aspirations, all of that simply dissolved. I was completely present in the moment, more aware than I had ever been. And then, in what should have been the moment of impact, something incredible happened. Instead of the pain I had expected, or the darkness of unconsciousness, I was engulfed by a brilliant light. It was as if my entire being had been absorbed by this light, transcending the limits of my physical body. In that instant, I realized that I was no longer falling. In fact, I no longer had any sensation of movement or of a physical body. It was as if I had become pure consciousness, floating in a vast ocean of light and energy. The transition was so smooth, so natural, that it took me a few moments to realize what had happened. I had left my body behind. The physical reality I knew was gone, and I was entering an entirely new and unknown realm. There was no fear in this realization. On the contrary, I felt an intense curiosity and openness to whatever was coming next. It was as if my entire life had been a preparation for this moment, for this experience that was about to unfold. As I became accustomed to this new state of being, I began to notice that the light around me was not uniform. There were nuances, patterns, and movements within it. It was as if the light itself was alive, pulsing with an energy that I could feel but not fully understand. And then, amidst this vast luminous expanse, I realized that I was not alone. There was a presence there with me, something vast and incomprehensible to my human mind. It wasn't something I could see in the traditional sense, but something I could feel with every fiber of my being. This presence emanated a sense of love and understanding so deep that I felt completely enveloped and accepted. All my fears, doubts, and insecurities seemed insignificant in the face of this loving and omniscient force. It was in that moment that I understood I had died, or at least I had experienced what we, in our limited human understanding, call death. But what I was experiencing wasn't an end. It was a beginning, an opening to something much greater and deeper than I could have ever imagined. As I floated in this ocean of light, I began to feel a soft but irresistible pull. It was as if the very light was calling me, guiding me towards something. There was no direction in the conventional sense. There was no up or down, but I knew I was moving towards something significant. As I progressed, the light intensified. It wasn't blinding or uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was welcoming and comforting. Colors I had never seen before danced around me, creating patterns of indescribable beauty. It was as if I were witnessing the very essence of creation. And then, I saw it. Or rather, I felt it. A presence so vast, so powerful, that my consciousness trembled. It was the source of the light, the origin of everything I was experiencing. It had no defined form, but it emanated an intelligence and love that transcended anything I had ever known. Instantly, I knew I was in the presence of something divine. It wasn't the anthropomorphic God of traditional religions, but something far more grand and incomprehensible. It was as if I were face to face with the very creative force of the universe. Communication with this entity didn't happen through words. It was a direct exchange of thoughts and emotions, deeper and clearer than any conversation I had ever had. In an instant, I felt my entire life being reviewed, not in a judgmental way, but with complete understanding and acceptance. Every moment of my existence, every choice I had made, every person I had encountered, everything was part of a larger pattern, a purpose I had never realized before. I saw how my actions had affected other people, for better or worse, in an intricate web of cause and effect. The most surprising thing was realizing that there was no judgment, only understanding, acceptance, and an unconditional love that left me speechless. I realized that the concept of sin as I knew it was a limited human construct. What mattered was learning, growth, the evolution of consciousness. At that moment, the entity began to show me things beyond my own life. I saw the creation of the universe, not as a singular event, but as a continuous and eternal process. Galaxies were born and died in the blink of cosmic eyes. I saw the evolution of life on countless planets, each following its own unique path. I understood that the universe we know is just a small part of a much larger and more complex reality. There are dimensions beyond what we can perceive, parallel realities that intertwine in ways our science has yet to comprehend. And at the center of it all was love. Not the romantic or familial love we know, but a fundamental force that permeates all existence. It was love that united atoms, moved galaxies, and drove the evolution of consciousness throughout the cosmos. I was overwhelmed. How could I, a simple human consciousness, comprehend all of this? And yet I felt that every particle of my being was absorbing this wisdom, this cosmic truth, on a level that went beyond intellectual understanding. The entity, sensing my state, enveloped me in a wave of comfort and security. I felt that, despite the vastness of what was being revealed, I was loved and valued. My existence, no matter how small it seemed in the grand scheme of things, had a purpose and meaning. It was at that moment that I understood. I was about to embark on a journey of discovery and revelation that would forever change my understanding of reality and my place in it. As I floated in this state of pure consciousness, the entity began to reveal the secrets of the cosmos to me in a way that my human mind could barely comprehend. It was as if all the knowledge of the universe was being poured into me, filling every fiber of my being with ancient and eternal wisdom. I saw the birth of our universe, not as the Big Bang that science describes, but as an explosion of pure consciousness. It was as if an infinite mind had decided to dream, and that dream became our reality. Every galaxy, every star, every planet was a thought in this vast cosmic dream. But the most surprising thing was realizing that our universe wasn't unique. I saw countless universes being born and dying, each with its own physical laws, its own forms of life, its own stories. It was an infinite dance of creation and destruction, an eternal cycle of cosmic renewal. I then understood that what we call God is only a small manifestation of this universal consciousness. The religions of Earth, I realized, were like children's tales, necessary simplifications of a truth so vast and complex that no human mind could fully comprehend it. The entity showed me how life naturally arises when conditions are right. I saw distant planets teeming with life forms so strange and wonderful that they defied imagination. Some were carbon-based like us, others silicon-based, and others still based on elements unknown to us on Earth. I realized that consciousness is not exclusive to living beings as we know them. Everything in the universe, in a way, is conscious. Rocks, planets, stars, all have their own form of consciousness, though vastly different from ours. The entire universe is a living, thinking being, constantly evolving. Time, as we know it, lost all meaning. I saw the past, present, and future existing simultaneously. Every choice, every decision we make creates new branches of reality, new universes of possibilities. And in the midst of all this vastness, I saw the role of humanity. We are, each of us, like cells in this cosmic organism. Our lives, our struggles, our joys and sorrows all contribute to the evolution of universal consciousness. The entity showed me how every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, every thought of love reverberates throughout the cosmos, affecting realities we cannot even imagine. Likewise, every act of cruelty, every thought of hatred, creates waves of discord that propagate far beyond our understanding. I then understood the true meaning of responsibility. Each of us, with our daily choices, is literally shaping the future of the universe. There are no insignificant actions, no thoughts without consequences. This revelation was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because I realized the weight of our actions, and liberating because I understood that we have the power to create positive change on a cosmic scale. The entity showed me that the purpose of life is not to reach some final goal, but to grow, evolve, and expand our consciousness. Every challenge we face and every pain we experience is an opportunity for learning and growth. In that moment, I felt a deep connection with all of existence. I was one with the universe, with every being, with every particle of existence. It was a feeling of completeness and belonging that I had never experienced before. And then, the entity presented me with the hardest choice I had ever faced. As I absorbed these cosmic revelations, feeling more connected and aware than I had ever been, the entity of light presented me with a choice that would change not only the course of my existence, but would have ramifications far beyond my comprehension. The entity showed me two paths. The first was to remain in this state of pure consciousness, fully merging with the light, becoming an integral part of this universal consciousness. It would be the end of my individual existence, but the beginning of a much greater existence, beyond any human concept of identity or ego. The second path was to return, to go back to my physical body, to my life on earth, carrying with me the knowledge and experience I had gained. It would be an opportunity to share this wisdom with the world, to make a unique and profound difference. Both paths had their appeal. The idea of merging with the whole, of eternally experiencing this sense of unity and unconditional love, was incredibly tempting. It would be the end of all suffering, all doubt, all limitation. On the other hand, the possibility of returning, of using this knowledge to help others, of being a beacon of light in a world often obscured by ignorance and fear, also deeply attracted me. The entity didn't pressure me in any direction. I felt that, whatever my choice, it would be accepted with love and understanding. It was a decision I had to make for myself. I reflected on my life up to that moment. I remembered the people I loved, the experiences I had shared, the dreams I had yet to fulfill. I thought about all the questions I had asked throughout my life, the philosophical quests that had led me to that point. I realized that, although the idea of merging with the whole was incredibly appealing, there was still much I wanted to experience as an individual being. There were lessons I still needed to learn, experiences I still needed to live. More than that, I felt a responsibility. Now that I had glimpsed these cosmic truths, I couldn't simply ignore them. I felt that I had a duty to share, in some way, what I had learned. With a mixture of determination and apprehension, I made my choice. I decided to return, to go back to the physical world, with all its limitations and challenges, but also with all its beauty and opportunities for growth. The moment I made this decision, I felt a wave of love and support emanating from the entity. There was no judgment, only acceptance and encouragement. I understood that, in a way, this choice was part of my path of evolution. The entity then began to prepare me for the return. I was warned that not all the wisdom I had acquired could be brought back. The human mind, in its current state, is not capable of fully processing the truths of the cosmos. Much of what I had experienced would be forgotten or buried in my subconscious. However, the essence of the experience, the unconditional love I had felt, the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, this I could take with me. It would be like a seed planted in my soul, which would grow and flourish over time. As I prepared for this journey back, I felt a mix of emotions. There was a certain sadness at leaving this state of pure consciousness, but also an excitement for the possibilities that awaited me. And so, with one last glimpse of the infinite light, I began my journey back to the physical world. The process of returning to my physical body was an experience as intense and surreal as the journey that preceded it. As I moved away from the presence of the entity of light, I felt as if I were being compressed, condensed back into a limited form after having experienced the vastness of the cosmos. At first, the transition was smooth. I could still feel the love and wisdom of the entity surrounding me, guiding me back. But as I got closer to the physical plane, I began to feel a growing resistance. It was as if I were swimming against an increasingly strong current. I remember passing through different levels or layers of existence. Each one seemed denser, more limited than the last. With each layer I passed through, I felt that part of the cosmic knowledge I had acquired was slipping away, sliding beyond my reach. I desperately tried to hold on to these truths, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. The more I tried, the more they seemed to escape. It was a moment of deep anguish, realizing that I couldn't bring all the wisdom I had experienced with me. As I approached the physical plane, I began to feel the limitations of the body again. The pain, the cold, the weight of matter, sensations I had completely forgotten during my cosmic journey, began to make themselves present again. The shock of returning was overwhelming. Suddenly, I was back in my body, lying in the cold snow of the mountain. The pain was intense. Every nerve in my body screamed in protest. The contrast with the state of peace and expansion I had experienced was so great that, for a moment, I wished I hadn't returned. I slowly opened my eyes, blinking against the daylight. The first thing I saw was Jared's face, my friend, leaning over me. His eyes were red and swollen, with frozen tears on his cheeks. He was shouting something, but I couldn't understand the words. The sound seemed distant, muffled. Gradually, my consciousness adjusted to physical reality. I began to hear the wind howling around us, feel the snowflakes falling on my face. The smell of the cold, crisp mountain air filled my nostrils. I tried to move, but my body didn't respond. Panic began to set in. Was I paralyzed? Had the fall caused irreversible damage? But then, slowly, I began to feel my fingers moving, then my arms, my legs. Jared helped me sit up. He was speaking rapidly, telling me how he had found me, how he thought I was dead, how it had been a miracle. But I barely listened. My mind was struggling to process everything that had happened, to reconcile the vastness of the experience I had had with the limited reality of the physical world. I looked at my hands, flexing my fingers. They felt strange, foreign, as if they weren't really mine. My whole body felt like a tight, uncomfortable suit after having experienced the freedom of formless existence. But along with this sense of discomfort and limitation, there was something else. A deep sense of purpose, of having been sent back for a reason. Although many of the details of my experience were already becoming hazy, the essence remained. The unconditional love I had felt, the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, this was etched into my soul. I looked at Jared, then at the mountains around us. Everything seemed different now, more alive, more connected. I knew my life would never be the same again. The challenge now would be to live with this knowledge, to integrate this experience into my daily existence. As Jared helped me to my feet, preparing for the difficult descent down the mountain, I knew I was beginning a new journey. A journey of rediscovery, of relearning, of trying to translate the cosmic wisdom I had experienced into something that could be understood and shared in the human world. The path ahead would be difficult, I knew. But I also knew that I carried something precious with me, something that had the potential to transform not only my life, but the lives of everyone around me. The days and weeks following my return were, without a doubt, the most challenging of my life. Readjusting to the physical world was a slow and often painful process, both physically and emotionally. Physically, my body had endured the impact of the fall. Although, miraculously, I hadn't broken any bones, I was covered in bruises and felt intense pain. The doctors were baffled by my survival, calling it a medical miracle. But the physical pain, no matter how intense, was only a fraction of the challenge I faced. The real challenge was in my mind and soul. After having experienced the vastness of the cosmos, the unity with all existence, the physical world seemed unbearably limited and restrictive. The everyday concerns that once occupied my mind now seemed trivial and meaningless. I struggled to connect with the people around me. My friends and family, although relieved and happy for my recovery, couldn't comprehend the depth of the change I had experienced. When I tried to explain, the words felt inadequate, incapable of capturing the magnitude of what I had lived through. Sleep became a challenge. Every time I closed my eyes, I was flooded with fragmented visions of my experience, flashes of cosmic light, sensations of infinite expansion, echoes of the unconditional love I had felt. I would wake up sweating, disoriented, uncertain of where or who I was. My perception of time had drastically changed. Minutes could feel like hours, and hours could pass in the blink of an eye. Sometimes, I would find myself staring at an ordinary object, a flower, a stone, a drop of water, completely fascinated by the complexity and beauty I could now perceive in every little detail. The activities that once brought me pleasure now felt empty. My philosophy studies, which had previously fascinated me, now seemed to only scratch the surface of the truths I had glimpsed. I struggled to find purpose, a reason to continue my normal life. At the same time, I felt an overwhelming urgency to share what I had learned. But how could I convey something so vast, so beyond common human experience? How could I translate cosmic truths into a language others could understand? I began writing furiously, trying to capture my memories before they faded completely. Pages and pages of notes, drawings, diagrams, desperate attempts to give form to the ineffable. But the more I wrote, the more inadequate the words seemed. My relationships suffered. Friends and family, worried about my apparent obsession, tried to bring me back to reality. But the reality they wanted to bring me back to no longer existed for me. I had glimpsed something greater, something more real than the physical world around us. There were moments of deep depression, moments when the disparity between what I had experienced and what I could express seemed insurmountable. Sometimes, I wondered if it wouldn't have been better to stay on the other side, merged with the cosmic light. Earthly life, with all its limitations and trivialities, felt like a prison. But then, gradually, something began to change. I started to realize that, while I couldn't directly convey the entirety of my experience, I could live according to the truths I had learned. The unconditional love I had felt, the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, that I could embody in my daily actions. I began to practice compassion in a way I never had before. Every person I met, I saw not just as an individual, but as a unique manifestation of the universal consciousness. Their struggles, their joys, their fears, I could understand and honor all of it on a deeper level. My relationship with nature also changed dramatically. I began to see every tree, every animal, every stone as part of a living, conscious whole. The beauty I could now perceive in the world around me was breathtaking. Slowly, I found ways to integrate my experience into my daily life. I abandoned my formal philosophy studies and began exploring spiritual practices from various traditions. Meditation, yoga, contemplation, all became an integral part of my daily routine. I started giving talks and workshops, not to directly explain my near-death experience, but to share the lessons I had learned about love, compassion, and interconnectedness. To my surprise, people responded. Something in what I said, in how I lived, seemed to touch something deep within them. Over time, the feeling of disconnection began to lessen. I learned to navigate between worlds, the physical world with its limitations and the spiritual world I had glimpsed. I started to see my experience not as a burden, but as a gift, an opportunity to bring a bit of cosmic light into the earthly realm. The adaptation was a long and often painful process. There were days when the longing for the other side was almost unbearable. But there were also moments of deep joy and gratitude, moments when I could once again feel that unconditional love flowing through me and touching the lives around me. I realized that my journey of adaptation was, in itself, a continuation of my near-death experience. It was an opportunity to bring a piece of heaven to earth, to live cosmic truths in the context of daily life. And so, day by day, I learned to live with one foot in each world, to honor the vastness I had experienced while navigating the complexities of human existence, to be a bridge between the known and the unknown, the finite and the infinite. Adaptation was never complete, and perhaps it never will be. But I learned to embrace that tension, to live on the boundary between worlds. And in that liminal space, I discovered a new way of being, a new way of experiencing life in all its complexity and beauty. As months turned into years, I realized that the near-death experience had not been just an isolated event in my life, but the catalyst for a profound and ongoing transformation. Every aspect of my existence had been touched and reshaped by that journey beyond the limits of life and death. My perception of the world and my place in it had radically changed. Where once I saw separation and individuality, I now saw connection and unity. Every person I met, every situation I faced, was an opportunity to practice the unconditional love I had experienced on the other side. My values and priorities underwent a complete shift. The material ambitions and desire for recognition that had once motivated me now seemed empty and meaningless. Instead, I found a deep sense of purpose in serving others, in being an instrument of healing and transformation in the world. My relationship with time had also transformed. The awareness of eternity I had experienced freed me from the fear of death and the anxiety about the future. I learned to live more fully in the present, to savor each moment as a unique expression of universal consciousness. My spirituality, which had once been more of an intellectual pursuit, became a lived experience, a daily reality. The practices I adopted, meditation, contemplation, service, were no longer just exercises, but gateways to reconnect with the vastness I had experienced. Curiously, my relationship with science also deepened. Far from rejecting scientific knowledge, I discovered that many of the intuitions I had brought back from my experience resonated with discoveries in quantum physics, neuroscience, and cosmology. I began to see science not as opposed to spirituality, but as another path to explore the mysteries of the universe. My relationships underwent a profound transformation. I learned to love in a freer, more unconditional way. Old resentments and hurts dissolved in the light of the broader understanding I had gained. I discovered a capacity for forgiveness and compassion that I hadn't known I possessed. My body was also affected by this transformation. I adopted practices of care and respect for the physical body, seeing it not as a prison for the soul, but as a sacred vessel for the earthly experience. Conscious eating, exercise, contact with nature, all became part of my daily spiritual practice. One of the most profound transformations was in my relationship with suffering, where before I had fled from pain and discomfort, I now saw them as opportunities for growth and expansion of consciousness. I learned to be present with suffering, my own and that of others, without being consumed by it. My creativity blossomed in unexpected ways. I began painting, writing poetry, composing music, forms of expression I had never explored before. It was as if the experience had unlocked something within me, opening channels for creative energy to flow more freely. Perhaps the most significant transformation was in my understanding of the purpose of life. I realized that we are not here to achieve some final goal, but to grow, to expand our consciousness, to be vessels through which the universe experiences itself. This transformation was not a smooth or linear process. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of wanting to return to the safety of my old worldview. There were days when the intensity of the experience seemed too much to bear, when I longed for the simplicity of my previous life. But with each challenge, each moment of darkness, I remembered that light, that unconditional love I had experienced. And that gave me the strength to continue, to dive deeper into the transformation. Gradually, I began to realize that this transformation wasn't just for me. Every change in me created waves of change around me. People were touched, inspired, transformed by my example, by the energy I emanated. I realized that my near-death experience hadn't been an end, but a beginning. The beginning of a journey of transformation that would continue for the rest of my life, and perhaps beyond. A journey of bringing a bit of that cosmic light into the world, of being a bridge between the visible and the invisible, the known and the unknown. And so, day by day, I continued to transform and be transformed. Open to the mystery, embracing the unknown, living each moment as an opportunity to experience and express that infinite love which is the essence of all existence. Today, years after that transformative experience in the mountains of British Columbia, I look back and see how every aspect of my life has been profoundly altered. The person I was before that fall on the mountain seems so distant, almost as if it were another life. The new perspective I've gained permeates every aspect of my existence. I no longer see the world as a place of separation and competition, but as an intricate fabric of interconnections, where every action, every thought, has repercussions that extend far beyond what we can imagine. Death, which I once avoided thinking about, is now a constant companion in my thoughts. Not with fear or anxiety, but with serene acceptance and even a certain curiosity. I know that what we experience as death is just a transition, a change of state. This understanding has freed me to live more fully, more authentically. My relationship with time has changed drastically. While I still live in the linear world of clocks and calendars, I have a deeper awareness of the illusory nature of time as we conceive it. Every moment is precious, a unique opportunity to experience and express life in all its fullness. Spirituality, for me, is no longer an external quest, but a reality lived every day. I no longer need elaborate rituals or rigid dogmas. I find the sacred in every breath, in every interaction, in every moment of silence. Meditation has become as natural as breathing, a way of constantly reconnecting with the vastness I experienced. My understanding of love has expanded immensely. The love I now feel and express is not limited or conditional. It is a love that embraces everything and everyone, that sees beauty and divinity even in the most challenging situations and in the most difficult people. This love has become the driving force of my life, guiding my actions and decisions. Science and spirituality, which once seemed like opposing fields, now merge in my understanding of the universe. I see the beauty of quantum physics equations with the same awe I feel when contemplating a sunset. The complexity of the human brain and the vastness of the cosmos are, to me, different expressions of the same creative intelligence. My relationship with nature has deepened immensely. Every tree, every stream, every mountain is a living, conscious being, part of the same web of life to which I belong. I've come to devote much of my time and energy to environmental preservation and restoration, seeing it not as an external cause, but as an act of cosmic self-care. Suffering, both personal and collective, still affects me deeply, but now I see it through a different lens. I understand that suffering, no matter how painful, is often a catalyst for growth and transformation. This allows me to be present with pain, both mine and others, in a more compassionate and effective way. My work in the world has completely changed. I left my old career behind and now dedicate my life to sharing the lessons I've learned. Through talks, workshops, writings, and above all, through the example of how I live my life, I try to inspire others to expand their consciousness, to connect with their divine essence. I don't claim to have all the answers. In fact, the more I learn, the more I realize how vast the mystery of existence is. But I carry with me a deep certainty, the certainty that we are all part of something much greater, that each of us is a unique and precious expression of universal consciousness. This new perspective hasn't eliminated all of life's challenges. I still face difficulties, I still make mistakes, I still have moments of doubt and fear. But now I face these challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth and expansion. Looking toward the future, I don't know exactly what lies ahead, but I know I will continue on this journey of discovery and transformation. I will continue to seek ways to translate the cosmic truths I've experienced into the language of everyday human experience. I will continue to be a bridge between worlds, bringing a bit of that infinite light into our earthly reality. And so, with each day, with each breath, I live with gratitude, with love, with a sense of awe at the miracle of existence. The near-death experience was not the end of my journey, it was only the beginning, a beginning that continues to unfold, revealing new depths, new heights, new dimensions of reality with each moment. This is my new perspective, a perspective of unity, of love, of infinite possibilities. And it is through this lens that I now see and live each moment of my existence. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to catch every new video and help us spread this message to as many people as possible. See you next time.